Well, welcome back to another segment of Beyond the Grassy Knoll. And we have with us today Dave McGowan. He's been on before, but this theme to which he's going to speak is much different than the last he shared with us back probably over a year ago. He has really gotten a lot of attention out of folks with this last series about which we will speak, and it's entitled, by Dave, Inside the LC, the strange but mostly true story of Laurel Canyon and the birth of the hippie generation. And I won't tell you I had a ringside seat for that. I was on the field playing, Dave. So, welcome to the Grassy Knoll, and thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me on. It's good to be back. It's been a while.
Yeah, it has been, and thanks for coming. And hopefully we can do a couple of shows with this, because just as you've said yourself, this topic, it is labyrinthine. I mean, it just goes all over the place. And we've had that kind of same feeling with Adam Golightly and Andy Colvin with what they've covered. It is absolutely fascinating, and you think it's over, and it's not over by any means, and that's exactly what you're dealing with right now. Now, the series is just 4 parts long, but what would you guess might be a ballpark number of parts that this could turn out to be?
I'm guessing probably a dozen at this point, but it's very much a work in progress. I'm still actively doing research and still updating my notes, and I mean, I just have tons and just pages and pages and pages of raw notes that I somehow or other have to try to shape into the remainder of this story. It's hard to say at this point, but I would guess that it'll probably run at least 12 installments.
Now, pardon the pun, but would you consider Laurel Canyon the epicenter of something?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It was definitely the epicenter of something. Exactly what, I don't know. And which I got to say came as quite a surprise to me, actually, because I don't know if you know this, but I could walk out the door right now and get in my car and be in the very heart of Laurel Canyon in like 15 minutes from my front door. And I've lived within a half an hour of it my entire life here in the LA area, and I've actively been researching this kind of stuff for I don't know, a good 10, 15 years, and yet I knew nothing about this place or the significance of it up until like a year or two ago. I knew absolutely nothing about it, and yet here it is right in my own backyard, and completely unknown to me and to just about everybody else in the quote-unquote conspiracy community. It's known to some degree to people that are real hardcore rock and roll aficionados that really followed this stuff through the 60s and whatnot. But the importance of it is not generally known at all. I mean, I drive through. I've been driving through it all my life to get to work. It's an easy way to get from the valley into the west side of LA. Either Laurel Canyon, Coldwater, and whatnot, and I've been driving through it off and on my whole life, and yet never had a clue that there was any special significance or any special history that this place had.
Let me just ask you, let's see, using the Hollywood Bowl as a reference point, where is Laurel Canyon in reference to that?
For the Hollywood Bowl?
Yeah, anywhere near it?
Kind of, sort of. It sits right above the Sunset Strip, what is known as the Sunset Strip, which is the section of Sunset Boulevard that used to be sort of an unincorporated strip that was like speakeasies and brothels and whatnot, and then later became this big club scene. But it sits basically right above West Hollywood, West LA area, and from the north it empties out into like Studio City, North Hollywood area. It's fairly close to the Hollywood sign. It's probably like a few miles west of the Hollywood sign. It's kind of hard to to describe to people that aren't familiar with the layout of the city of LA and the San Fernando Valley and whatnot. But
I just spent some time with a first cousin of mine back in like '75. He was a screenwriter at that time, and he was living on Highland Avenue, which branched off whatever the road is on which the Hollywood Bowl sits. And I've forgotten the name of it, but he was up in the hills someplace on the east side, away from the Hollywood Bowl. But that's all I remember of L.A. And actually, I remember very little what I did out there, thankfully. So
the Hollywood Bowl, I think it sits in the Cahuenga Pass, I believe, doesn't it? Which is where the 101 freeway cuts through, and then so it's not far. It's not too far from there. Mm-hmm. It's I don't know.
No, there was just a lot of topography there, and it was in the hills. And I was wondering when I was, and I know there is a map, kind of a map that's associated. Well, you have it built in one of your articles about the layout of Laurel Canyon. But for folks who aren't that familiar with it, Laurel Canyon, how would you define it? And to what era would you say it's best associated?
It is, how would I describe it? It's a very sort of secluded, sort of exclusive, almost self-contained sort of neighborhood. It's not actually a city at all. It's a community, I guess you could say, sort of a self-contained community up in the Hollywood Hills that's fairly secluded in that there's really only one road into there, which is Laurel Canyon Boulevard, which cuts through. And Laurel Canyon Boulevard actually carries quite a bit of traffic these days because it's, like I said, it's an easy way to cut through directly from the valley to the west side. But if you get off of Laurel Canyon Boulevard onto any of the little winding side streets that branch off of it, they're pretty much all dead end roads. So once you know there's only one way in, and then you're just sort of in this maze of winding roads that go nowhere. So once you get actually into the canyon, it's very, very kind of secluded and very self-contained. It has its own little grocery store and its own little boutique shops and various things like that. It has its own elementary school. At one time, it even had its own newspaper, which is where that map came from back in the olden days. So it's this sort of it's almost, I mean, you go up there and it's all, you feel like you're not even really in LA anymore. I mean, you're up there in this very heavily wooded, very rustic, serene, sort of, mountain setting, sort of a country setting, and it's very easy to forget that you're actually in the city of LA, although you have great views down onto the, commoners down below from up there. But once you get up there, it just seems so far removed from the city itself. I mean, it's almost like you've jumped on a plane and gone to some remote location, because it has its own unique, distinct feel that's separate from the city itself.
Well, now I had asked you to what era that area is most associated with. That's really not a fair question, because that place has always been the place to be, so to speak, from the 20s with I guess the Hollywood film starlets and such, right up through the 60s and 70s, which you deal the most with. But isn't that the reason why, too, that it is a self-contained place? You don't drive through Laurel Canyon. If you're going in there, you're going in there to see somebody. You got business. There's no drive-through. And if those people don't want to come out for whatever reason, they really don't have to.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, the Laurel Canyon grew up with the film industry. It was developed in conjunction with the onset of the movie industry. Yeah, and from the very beginning, that was one of the main the people that flocked to the canyon were a lot of the early movie stars who could get up and have privacy and seclusion. You're out pretty much, in the boonies is the feel of it when you're up there. You feel very far removed from the city, and so it definitely had an attraction for the movie people who wanted, the privacy and the, to get away from it all, so to speak. So yeah, it's always been it's always been a favored place for the Hollywood crowd ever since its earliest development back in like 1913 is when development really first began on it, and right from the beginning, I mean, some of the earliest residents were like Tom Mix, Harry Houdini, Wally Reed, all these big name, Ramon Navarro, these big the big Hollywood icons of that day, and it's been like that ever since. I mean, if you look at every decade since then, you've had people like W.C. Fields and Robert Mitchum, and in the 50s you had all these young, the young stars like James Dean and Natalie Wood and Dennis Hopper and Sal Mineo, and yeah, it's been an exclusive sort of, very, very upscale retreat, for people with money, including the Hollywood crowd, since its inception.
And you really, you do provide a bit of a history, just as you've given us now in that series, but you deal with it mainly as some kind of really epicenter for the 60s and 70s rock and roll scene.
That's when it really, that was kind of Laurel Canyon's heyday, from like the, say, mid-60s, from like around 1965 through the late 70s up until almost like till 1980. It was just this huge epicenter of music, of this new, the new 60s brand of rock and roll music, beginning with the Byrds and Buffalo Springfield and the Turtles and the Mothers of Invention, the Doors, Love, the Mamas and the Papas, and then from there, which I haven't gotten to in the series yet, but from there, following that first big, batch of bands that came out of there, then it kind of shifted over to like a singer-songwriter kind of thing, and you had James Taylor and Joni Mitchell, Judy Collins, Carole King, Jackson Brown, and then from there, then the next sort of wave was all these like country rock sort of people like America and Flying Burrito Brothers and Poco and the Eagles, and it's an amazing list. If you look at the complete list of all of the singers and songwriters and musicians that emerged from that canyon over like a 10-year period, it's staggering. I mean, it's unbelievable how many people came out of this very small, very isolated little canyon community over the beginning in the mid-60s and onward.
There didn't have to necessarily be anything there of this sort. I'm going to assume that there are no recording studios there, but that place is a hop, skip, and a jump from I would assume Electra Asylum and some other recording studios.
Yeah, it's just above the Sunset Strip, but there wasn't a huge amount of recording studios and whatnot before the big influx of bands. They actually kind of, in a big way, they kind of created the LA music scene and made it what it is today. Made LA the epicenter of the music world. That's one point that I made in the series, is that they weren't coming here because this was the mecca for musicians. They made it that.
Mecca music, right?
All of these Asylum Records was actually started here by David Geffen, who signed up a lot of these people, and a lot of these record companies. They were mostly based in New York at the time, and some of them didn't even have West Coast representatives when this whole scene started to break, and they had to kind of, get people out here to start signing up all these bands. But yeah, there was some, to some degree, there was recording studios and whatnot, but these bands really kind of made the scene what it is today, and a lot of them actually built their own recording studios. Brian Wilson with the Beach Boys built his own, John Phillips built his own, Frank Zappa, and, a lot of these guys built their own home studios. Mike Nesmith of the Monkees built his own, and So yeah, they really transformed the whole LA music in the whole music industry in general. Because I mean, some of the albums in it ended up coming out of Laurel Canyon. Just I mean, they sold so many copies, and they just completely It was kind of the beginning of the whole corporatization of the music industry, with these just huge monster albums that came out, like, you know, Carole King's Tapestry and the Eagles' Hotel California and Fleetwood Mac's Rumors, and just, you know, these just huge monster albums that completely redefined what a hit record was. And you know, so yeah, it was the music industry in LA really grew up around all of these bands, but there was some facilities to begin with, but
it was more a case that they went ahead and made it the scene, and then the industry followed the scene.
Pretty much so, yeah. Because before that, the music scene was basically centered in Nashville, New York, and I'm drawing a blank. Memphis, I think it was.
Oh, with Sun Records.
Yeah, and LA was just sort of a real a minor player. You know, LA was the movie. You know, they had the Hollywood. They had the motion picture industry pretty much centered here, but the music industry really wasn't until like the late '60s. I just read the other day that prior to that, like in 1963 or something, of the number one songs. Of the songs that hit number one and for that year, like something like 26 of them came out of New York, and like 3 of them came out of LA. And within like a few years, those numbers had like completely reversed, and LA had become by far the dominant music producer, the music capital of the country, of the world, pretty much.
It also seemed to me that one of the places to be seen out there as well, or at least to perform, a club, I guess, that comes up time and time again, is the Troubadour.
Doug Weston's Troubadour, the Whiskey A Go-Go, the London Fog, Pandora's Box, Ciro's. There was a whole
the Losers Club.
Yeah, the Troubadour was one of the big ones. That was the Troubadour is really where the whole country rock movement got started, beginning with Graham Parsons and his Flying Burrito Brothers, and Poco, which was kind of an offshoot of Buffalo Springfield, and carrying through to the Eagles, who made it this huge commercial force that it was. Basically what the Eagles did was take this pioneering work done by Graham Parsons and Chris Hillman and others, and turned it into this big commercial huge corporate the huge corporate entity that it now is.
In fact, I still remember that there was kind of a protege that was going on, where the Eagles protege Jackson Browne, and Jackson Browne protege Warren Zevon. And this thing, I want to tell you also, this is very reminiscent of the liner notes that I read in The Best of Carla Bonoff, when she breaks down how things were going out there, because she was involved with a lot of those same personages, and of course all the main players, if you remember, from the Electric Asylum, I guess you would call stable performers, like Kenny Edwards, and Russ Kunkel and Andrew Gold and all them. And she reminisces about having a $200 a month flat out in San Fernando Valley. So, but in those liner notes, she talks a lot about the same things that you're speaking to, also about how things were back in those days. But there's also something else that's kind of curious as far as commonalities go with rock and roll, with Laurel Canyon, and also with a lot of these stars, rock and roll stars, having been sired by family members, a spouse or so, that was in the military intelligence complexes.
Yeah, to uncanny degree. There's a lot of them there's a lot of sons and daughters of the military intelligence complex running around, and a lot of sons and daughters of families that have an incredible amount of wealth and political power as well. Yeah.
Well, I tell you what, can we ding off a couple of these on the list here? if you don't mind?
Sure. Where do we start?
Well, yeah, I was going to say with Jim Morrison, who nobody would associate with being the prodigy of some heavy military folks. In this case, his father was a big naval guy, was he not?
Yes, he was, and yeah, that's one of the ones that seems to shock a lot of people. I've gotten more responses concerning Morrison than anyone else. He has some very rabid fans who are bound and determined to defend their man, which I can kind of understand. But yeah, Jim Morrison was the son of a U.S. naval admiral, and not just any U.S. naval admiral, but the one who was actually in command of the fleet of ships that was involved in the so-called Tonkin Gulf incident, where two of our ships supposedly came under attack from North Vietnamese forces, but later it was basically acknowledged that it never even happened, that they basically made the whole thing up and used that as the pretext to greatly escalate the war. And immediately following that, of course, was the Tonkin Gulf Resolution, which gave the president, pretty much unlimited powers to wage war. And right after that, we began massive bombing campaigns that didn't stop for years. And we almost immediately began shipping the first uniformed ground troops over there. And within a year of that incident, we had 200,000 men already over there in country, more in 1 year than we've built up in over in the Middle East in 5 or 6 years, or however long that nightmare's been going on. So there was just a huge, massive escalation of the war that occurred right after this incident, and the guy that was in command of those ships at that time was Jim Morrison's dad, of all people. Yeah, very odd. Very small world that at the very time that the father's over there, working to create this pretext for a full-scale American immersion into that war, the son's over here positioning himself to become this huge icon of the anti-war movement. Very odd, and he never mentioned throughout his career. In fact, he was fond of telling reporters that his parents were dead, that his family was dead, and which a lot of people have written to me to tell me. They say, well, you say that Jim Morrison never spoke out about his parents, but he used to tell interviewers that he was dead, and the reason that he did that was because he felt that they were dead to him. Symbolically, they were dead to him, and he wanted nothing to do with them. And meanwhile, I'm saying, well, then how come he was sitting on the bridge of his dad's ship, 1 year before his band came out? And have you ever considered that maybe he did that because that was a very convenient way to avoid talking about who his dad really was? If you don't want to talk about who your dad was, you tell people that he's dead, and you don't have to talk about it, right? So, I don't, I know it upsets a lot of people, but I don't know. And I was a huge Doors fan. I still am to some degree, but I listen to the music in a little different way now, I guess. It's just, I don't know, it's tainted in a way to me now,
Yeah, I understand that completely, and I'll try to get back to the point of what this really says about who these people might really have been, and how much of a coincidence this all is, because the next character of renown that fits into this paradigm is Frank Zappa.
Yeah, Frank Zappa was a hugely influential character in Laurel Cabin. For a while, he occupied the sort of what was sort of a communal house throughout the mid to late 60s, which was Tom Mix's old log cabin, which, despite the name, is not like what you'd expect a log cabin to be. It was actually this huge, massive 5-level former roadhouse/tavern, and which he holed up in for a while, and that was sort of the major gathering spot for Laurel Canyon royalty. I mean, anybody who was anyone stopped by the log cabin, and even though his band was never hugely commercially successful, he was very influential among his peers, and he started up his own record labels and signed up a lot of the bands. You know, a lot of people probably don't realize that he's the one that signed Alice Cooper and launched his career, and you know, some other people as well. So he was a very influential character in the Canyon, and his dad was actually a chemist at the Edgewood Arsenal doing chemical warfare research. Frank actually lived there for like the first 7 years of his life. He lived in military housing on the grounds of the Edgewood Arsenal and attended the Edgewood School. So he was a product of the Edgewood Arsenal, of all places.
Now, wait, is Edgewood Arsenal, is that the one in Maryland?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, outside of Baltimore.
Yep,
yeah,
right.
It's a very infamous facility. It's been the home of U.S. chemical warfare research for decades and decades, and it also comes up rather frequently in like the MK Ultra research. It's been linked repeatedly to various, you know, projects and sub-projects of the quote-unquote MK Ultra program. So, yeah, I mean, anybody that's done any conspiracy research at all is pretty much is familiar with the Edgewood Arsenal. So, when you hear that this huge figure in the music community at that time was a direct product of that facility, that definitely sets off some alarm bells for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then there's John Phillips. John Phillips was another hugely influential figure. He was, you know, not only the founder of the Mamas and the Papas, one of the most commercially successful Laurel Canyon bands, but he also co-organized the Monterey Pop Festival and wrote the song that kind of served as the siren song for the Summer of Love that was sung by his buddy Scott McKenzie. The song San Francisco, Be Sure to Wear Flowers in Your Hair was a wretched song, but everybody knows it. So he was a hugely influential character also on the music scene and in sort of disseminating this whole music scene to the rest of the country through the Monterey Pop Festival and drawing people into the Summer of Love and all that. And he's got more military connections than, I mean, it's just, his dad was a career Marine Corps officer. He himself attended Annapolis Naval Academy. His first wife, who was a direct descendant of John Adams and John Quincy Adams, worked at the Pentagon. His older sister Rosalind worked at the Pentagon. His brother was a retired Marine with combat experience who became a dirty D.C. area cop. And his mother worked her entire career in some capacity for the federal government. So, I mean, everybody around his entire family worked directly for, the military intelligence complex. Everyone but him, supposedly, or that's what we're supposed to believe, that even though, you know, everybody that surrounded this guy was employed by the Defense Department in some capacity, and even though he, attended military academies and graduated from Annapolis and, had all these other strange, biographical details that, we're supposed to believe that he had nothing to do with any of that, which I find a little hard to believe myself, especially when you considering that he's just one of many of the people in Laurel Canyon that had that kind of background. I mean, if it was just one or two of these guys, maybe you could overlook it and say, okay, that's a coincidence, or, this guy went into this career because he's rebelling against his parents' values, blah, blah, blah. But when you come up to it time after time after time after time, it kind of gets a little difficult to just sort of, write it off as a coincidence or an aberration or what have you.
Well, that's where I want to go in this as we're approaching the bottom of the hour. And again, folks, this is a good time to just take a departure for a second. We're talking with Dave McGowan. Dave, you want to give the website and how people can find out about not only this series but the past information and articles you've disseminated?
Yeah. The website is www.davesweb.cnchost.com. That's Dave's Web, DAVESWEB.CNCHOST.com. Kind of a pain in the butt, but...
That's all right. And for those who can't write that fast, along with the posting of your URL and the link to the audio will be your website as well, so they can click on that. In fact, as they're listening to it now, whenever now should be, they can also hit your website as we speak. So not a problem. But now what's interesting is you have a lot of information up there, but you don't sell a whole lot of things. Is that correct?
I don't sell any. I'm not here to sell anything. No. I mean, I do have 3 books out, but the most recent book that I put out was Program to Kill, which I think was released in 2004. So it's been out there for a while. Still a good book if anybody wants to read it, but no, I'm not. I have nothing to pitch. Unfortunately.
Well, Program to Kill, I think, what would you call that your favorite baby? Would that be correct?
That is, that's one of my proudest accomplishments. I really like that book. People have very mixed reactions to it, but of the 3, it's the one that I'm proudest of. Yeah.
And what are the other 2 titles, Dave?
The other 2 titles, one of them goes almost a decade old now. It's hard to believe. I think it was published in '99 or something. Was Derailing Democracy, and then in 2001, I think, was Understanding the F Word. So those are both. Yeah, those are even older ones. So I have nothing. I have nothing new to sell. Just my new series on my website, which is freely available to anyone who wants to venture over and take a look.
And again, we're talking about Inside the LC, the strange but mostly true story of Laurel Canyon and the birth of the hippie generation. And admittedly, you were born in '60. I have 9 years on you, so a lot about what you wrote, I got a chance to, like I said, be a participant in to a certain extent. But for yourself, I mean, not that you had to be born when I was, or even before that, to appreciate that. But you also, now, did you have older siblings that kind of like had music hanging around that you might not have listened to, unless you had somebody older who was playing stuff that you kind of, like that happened with my sister, who's 8 years ahead of me. I mean, I was hearing rock and roll when I was 6 years old, and it kind of like all sank in. Did you have a situation where you had someone older who was into this, and it kind of just by osmosis got into you as well?
A little, not too much. I have 2 older brothers, but we were very, very close. The middle brother is 1 year older than me, and my oldest brother is 2 years older. We're a Catholic family. My mom was just pumping them out. I mean, we were literally like a year apart. I don't know how the hell she even did it.
God bless her, yeah.
And she would have had more, but she had problems with delivering me, and the doctors told her she couldn't have any more. She would have pumped out more. But, so I do have 2 older brothers, but not a great deal older, but they were into music a little before me, and probably got me into it a little earlier than I would have otherwise. I remember the first concert I went to, I was probably 12 years old, to see Three Dog Night at the Forum, which was interesting, and I was actually going to go with my mother because I wasn't old enough to go alone. And we happened to have an older cousin who was out visiting from Iowa at the time, and I ended up going with this cousin of mine who was like 19 or 20 at the time, which was very cool because it spared me from having to go with my mom.
Yes, right.
So yeah, the first concert I went to, I was very young, and I was shocked that like all these people around us were smoking pot and stuff. I didn't know what the hell was going on. So yeah, that was my first concert, and they were a Laurel Canyon band as well. I left them off the list, but yeah, Three Dog Night was yet another Laurel Canyon band.
Well, I think I got this right, and this is just a little minutia, which you can forget about as soon as it comes out of my mouth. But I think Chuck Negron is a Jersey guy, and if memory serves me correctly, I had a good friend in the Jersey days who lived across the street from his sister during the high point of Three Dog Night, and of course he fell on some hard times, and I think apparently has reinvented himself and is kind of going back out and singing again. But did you? I don't know how deeply you went into. Now you do address Negron and Three Dog Night. Did you find not that this isn't really necessary, but if he had Jersey roots in that?
I can't remember. I think he may have. I'd have to look it up. I know I have it in my notes. He was a basketball star. He was a star athlete, and he was a renowned basketball star. I know that, and I don't remember all the details of his bio.
Well, he got into some bad drug situations, didn't he?
He ended up. I mean, the band was hugely successful. I mean, just massively successful. Just a whole string of hit singles and hit albums. They made tons of money. And then he developed just a major heroin addiction, and went through something like 24 attempts at rehab that all failed, and ended up actually living on the streets, homeless and penniless for a while, and finally cleaned himself up, and I think he's doing better now. Although his son also went through a major ordeal. I don't know how he's doing now, but he definitely fell on hard times and almost ended up bludgeoned in the Wonderland house, according to his own account. According to his own account, he was a regular buyer from that house and had set up a buy that very night, but because he was already trashed, he fell asleep and never made it over, or he might have ended up one of the bodies on the floor of the Wonderland house. He definitely hit some bad times.
So Negron might very well have been in the Wonderland house when Manson's posse descended upon them.
Well, it wasn't Manson. It was actually Eddie Nash's posse in the Wonderland house, and including John Holmes. That's an interesting story in and of itself. But that happened in Laurel Canyon. A lot of people probably don't realize that. Wonderland Avenue runs right through the heart of Laurel Canyon, and it's kind of odd that what is considered to be the most brutal mass murder in LA history, occurred in this exclusive, remote, very serene, rustic neighborhood. Played host to the most brutal murder in the city's history.
Now, is that account chronicled in any kind of movie? Was there a movie out there about?
It's a Well, it was fictionalized in Boogie Nights. The incident was sort of fictionalized in the movie Boogie Nights by whatever that guy's name is, the guy that did the...
Marky Mark?
No, I think it's the director. I can't, but it's handled in a much more literal, realistic fashion in a movie called Wonderland with Val Kilmer.
Right.
That gives a few different versions of the crime from different people's perspective, and kind of leaves it to the viewer to decide which one or which combination of ones is the truth. Chuck Negron was a regular visitor there, and his bandmate Danny Hutton lived right down the street. He lived on Wonderland Avenue. A whole bunch of them lived on Wonderland Avenue. That band, did you know that band, by the way, was basically formed by Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys?
No, had no idea. No, not even a connection.
Yeah, it's Danny Hutton was one of his best friends, good buddies. He hung out with Brian all the time, and Brian sort of started them out. It was originally called Redwood, and he recorded their original demos and got the three guys together, Hutton and Negron and Corey Wells. And he was the original driving force behind Three Dog Night. Strangely enough, was Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys.
Well, that's another whole story too with the Beach Boys, and I won't go into that right now. But
yeah, Dennis Wilson, and
and then Brian frying his brain for the most part, and some of the stuff they were involved with, and there's another character in there too, Terry Melcher, right? Isn't that Doris Day's son?
Terry Melcher, he was a big player in the Laurel Canyon scene. Yeah, he produced the Byrds, the first big Laurel Canyon band. He produced a lot of the albums that came out of there, and was closely associated with a lot of these musicians. Good buddy with Dennis Wilson, him and Wilson and Greg Jacobson, his right-hand man, who was married to the daughter of Lou Costello, the old-time comedian. They were, the three of them, Wilson and Melcher and Jacobson, were major players in a lot of this stuff, and they called themselves the Golden Penetrators, by the way. That was the nickname that the three of them gave themselves, and I'll leave it to your listeners to figure out why.
Well, that's right up there with the Honey Drippers, so...
the three of them, and of course their fourth buddy, Charlie Manson, who was very much a part of the whole scene, and was very close to Melcher and Wilson, and lived with Wilson for the summer of '68, and had visited the Cielo Drive house with Terry Melcher, who lived there before Polanski and Tate, and that whole. I haven't really got into too much of that yet, but that's a whole other thread that runs through this story. Is the whole Charlie Manson angle and all of the people that he was connected to, and particularly Melcher and Wilson.
Okay. Also, that number is very large among the Laurel Canyon alumni. Are two very heavy hitters who joined together but came from different beginnings. And let's take them one at a time. First, the two of them were Stephen Stills and then David Crosby. But let's take Stephen Stills first. That's another an aha about where he comes from.
According to what I've read, and I've had a little more trouble digging up biographical details on him than some of the other guys, but from what I've gathered, his father was a career military. He grew up basically in Texas, but his father spent a considerable amount of time in Central America, Panama Canal Zone, El Salvador, Costa Rica, various other places. And, of course, as everyone knows, Central America has been a hot spot of covert intelligence and military operations for as long as anybody can remember, and that's where his pop spent a lot of his time down there, and occasionally Stephen would go down there with him, and he attended military academies and schools on military bases and whatnot, and basically had the same sort of military brat upbringing that all the rest of these guys did. He was surrounded by military and intelligence types, and attended military schools and came from a military family and yada yada yada. And he also, one of the most interesting parts about the Stephen Stills story is that later on, he used to tell people that he had served a term of duty over in Vietnam, which is universally dismissed. Every time you see it in the literature, it's immediately followed by a dismissal that was just a drug-fueled delusion that he had, and it couldn't have actually happened because he showed up on the Laurel Canyon scene at the very time that the first uniformed troops were arriving in Vietnam, and he remained in the public spotlight for the rest of his life. So obviously he couldn't have served a term of duty. But what all of these people ignore, deliberately or otherwise, is that we had people there from at least 1961 on, hundreds of quote-unquote advisors who were actually, CIA Special Forces personnel over there, doing their thing covertly before we introduced ground troops. And, given his background, his family background and whatnot, it's entirely possible that he that he could have been served some time over in Vietnam. In the early days, back before we were openly engaged in Vietnam, he very well could have. And that's what he told people, and of course nobody wanted to believe it. But to me, it's entirely feasible that he could very well have done that. So that's Stephen Stills. David Crosby is an interesting character. He is also the son of a military intelligence guy, World War II military intelligence guy, Floyd Delafield Crosby. But beyond that, he's also, his full name is actually David McCortland Crosby, and he's actually the offspring of these three sort of very closely intermarried, intertwined families, the Van Rensselaer, Van Cortlandt, and Van Schuler families, which, if you look them up, has produced just this whole slew of important people. I mean, just Navy admirals, generals, Supreme Court justices, federal judges, U.S. senators, congressmen, state senators, governors. This family has occupied every conceivable position of power in the political and legal realms since the founding of the country. And he's also a direct descendant of both John Jay and Alexander Hamilton.
Oh, but also, Dave, I tell you, those families that you mentioned, Van Rensselaer, Van Schuyler, Van Cortlandt, along with Roosevelt, they comprise what we call, the East Bank families that go back to the beginning Dutch patroons along the Hudson River. I mean, those names are all there to be seen to this day. Rensselaer, is a county in New York, and Van Cortlandt. Rockefeller's place is now also up in that area.
Yeah, those names are all over the place.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't realize it till I started looking into it. But yeah, there's a Van Cortlandt Park in New York. There's a Van Rensselaer Hotel. Those names are attached to all kinds of parks and public buildings, and the Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, and
yep.
Yeah, they're everywhere.
Oh, but that's reminiscent, though. I mean, of the rich Dutch that were here, obviously, and finally gave way to the British. But like I said, that whole East Bank is just rife with their. You can go there and go on their estates, and also another one that's involved in that is Vanderbilt. So that was some kind of neighborhood on the east side of the Hudson River, and that extends right up through that Albany area, where again where Rensselaer County is, and also Rensselaer Institute. So that's some family to be hooked into, and Crosby's in that bloodline, is he not?
Yeah, absolutely. It's he carries the name. He's definitely in the line of descent of that family. Absolutely, yeah. And and there were others as well. I mean, one of the other names on the scene who never made it as big as some of these other people that we're talking about, but he was very much on the scene, was Ned Doheny, who was an offspring of the Doheny clan, the oil family that. For those of you who've seen the movie There Will Be Blood, the book that's based on oil was actually inspired by the senior Ned Doheny, and so the homicidal Daniel Plainview character is actually based on Ned Doheny, and it's a very extremely wealthy family. They built what back in I think the 1920s they built the Greystone Estate, which is said to be the most expensive private residence ever built in Los Angeles County. This is a hugely wealthy family, wealthy and powerful family, and one of their offspring, Ned Doheny, was another member of the Laurel Canyon crowd. And Graham Parsons also, his family owned something like a third of all the citrus groves in Florida and Georgia. It was just massively wealthy family. And he was another member of the Laurel Canyon royalty. So yeah, if you go down the line, that's what you find. You find either military intelligence background or just these hugely wealthy and powerful families, or both.
Yeah, but Graham Parson too. That was such a strange episode with him upon his death.
Oh, that was just, very bizarre with the whole Manson connection through Phil Kaufman, and that was...
Oh, well, even the way they disposed of his body, if you remember, that nearly got a whole bunch of other rock and rollers indicted, when they burned his body out in the desert.
Yeah, they kidnapped his body, I don't know if kidnapped is the right word, stole his body, whatever it is.
Well, they said they were executing, bad choice of words, his wishes to be cremated in the desert.
Supposedly, yeah, and the whole story is just weird because he was under like LAPD guard, and these two disreputable characters, Phil Kaufman, I don't remember who the other one, pull up in like this beat up old hearse that they had gotten somewhere with like broken windows and all that, and just supposedly just snatched this body like right out from under the nose of the LAPD, and then took it out to Joshua Tree. And, ritually burned it, like on the summer solstice or the equinox or some such thing. All masterminded by Phil Kaufman, who was the Graham Parsons road manager. But before that, he was a buddy of Charles Manson's in Terminal Island Prison. And later in the canyons, he hooked up with him again later. When they both got out of prison. Manson got out in 67 and Kaufman in 68. And, and this guy, this ex-con friend of Charlie Manson somehow managed to become the road manager for, like, the Rolling Stones and the Flying Burrito Brothers and all these other bands.
I know, it never ends.
Which is kind of, what the hell was that guy even do,
Well,
but yeah, he's the one that snatched Parsons' body and took it out and burned it. Which was just one of many weird deaths in the Parsons family, by the way. The entire family seems to have gotten bumped off over the years, one at a time. So,
also, Graham Parsons is forgotten for the most part because he really wasn't on the tip of tongues back in the 70s either. But those of us who remember him as a seminal member of the Flying Burrito Brothers, which spawned off, so many artists that went into other groups. Rick Roberts with Firefall, Bernie Leadon, it goes on and on and on.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he was right on the cutting edge even before that, with his International Submarine Band, which was the band that he had when he first showed up in Laurel Canyon, and then that one disbanded and partially reformed as the Flying Burrito Brothers, along with, Hillman from the Byrds and Bernie Leadon, who would go on to the Eagles. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was the sound that he came up with. He was hugely influential on the Rolling Stones too, in their country phase. The country honk and.
Hence the song that he does is a tribute to them, Wild Horses, right?
Yeah, he actually recorded Wild Horses before they did. It was actually released on his album before the Stones did their own version of it. And although it's credited to Jagger and Richards, it's pretty well. Assume that Parsons had a major role in writing that, as well as some of their other country-influenced songs that they had on whichever, I don't know, was it Beggar's Banquet, or I don't know, one of their albums was really heavily country-influenced. And that was due to Parsons, and the Eagles' entire career was was based on taking what Parsons did and commercializing it, basically.
In fact, I think you could say that Parsons was a founding father of country rock, and also he saluted somewhat in the Eagles song "Hickory Wind" that's on the Border album.
Oh, did they record Hickory Wind?
Yes, they did. Yeah, and that's all about Parsons, because when I came into this in '73, I believe Parsons had already died. Well, of course he had died, and I had no idea. And somebody said, no, that's where it all starts. When you listen to that song, they're talking about Graham Parsons, and that's the person who birthed all this. There'd be no Eagles without Parsons.
No, there would be no. There probably would have been no Jackson Browne, or a lot of these. That whole sort of country rock. movement that came out of that. Yeah, he spearheaded that whole thing pretty much.
What I want to do is, we only have about 5 minutes left, and I won't go into any more personages, and we really just touched upon that first part of the 4 parts you have right up on the website right now. Again, the series is called Inside the LC, The Strange But Mostly True Story of Laurel Canyon and the Birth of the Hippie Generation. But I want to ask you an outro question. You can have the rest of the time to go ahead, if you don't mind. We're hoping to see you back perhaps in a week or two, Dave. But, you know, when you look at these people, I'm going to play devil's advocate, another bad choice of words, but when you look at these individuals who come out of families who have a foot in heavily, if not both, into military intelligence work, whatever, government, now, if there's a conspiracy, I'm going to deal with that perhaps when we talk to you again. But I'm just going to ask you, is there a chance that obviously these individuals, these offspring of military government types, probably have some really good genetic material, a decent IQ? Could it be that they just, with their gifts, rebelled against mom and dad and went off on this thing? And I'll just leave it right there, because then there's other things we can talk about in another interview. What's the chances that they're just really gifted, had the best of the best, and chose perhaps to, and of course, obviously they had to have a musical inclination, otherwise this would not even, we wouldn't be talking about them.
Yeah.
What's the chances that they just said, you know, I mean, they're gifted, but mom and dad, I think you suck, and I'm going to do this?
I think if it was just in a few cases, I think that there would be pretty good odds that was what was at play here. And in some of these cases, a few of the cases that may be what is at play. But it's very hard for me to believe that so many of them could have the same background, and that they could all just sort of magically come together in this one little remote spot perched in the hills above L.A., especially considering that a huge number of them came from the Washington, D.C. area. I mean, just an uncanny number of them came directly from the D.C. area. And it's very difficult for me to believe that it's just sheerly coincidence that all of these people just happened to come together in this one little isolated place, and almost all of them just happened to have the same sort of the same background if you dig deep enough. And there's no doubt that a lot of them were talented. I mean, I've been a huge fan of the music for a very long time, and I mean, to me, there's nobody who's ever picked up the instrument can play the guitar better than Jimi Hendrix, and nobody's ever matched the raw power and emotion of Janis Joplin's vocals, and on and on and on. I mean, Frank Zappa was. I'm not a huge fan of his music, but I can recognize that he was a incredibly talented musician and composer. So they definitely did have talent. I mean, it wasn't that they were just sort of put in this position because of their backgrounds. I mean, they did have the talent to back it up. There's no doubt about that. But my question is, were they the only ones? I mean, was there nobody else, Was there no just average Joes out there in the country that had this, that had the talent and the ambition to succeed, or was it only the people that had the connections who got the lucrative contracts and all the heavy promotion from the record labels and the radio stations and whatnot?
Well, I tell you what, of course, I have to agree with you, and we'll get into that in a second interview if we could. But I at least wanted to throw that out there, because I guess that's what some debunkers would say. It's just like, hey, you have this strain of rather high-quality genetic material, and they're going to do what they're going to do. But I don't think you and I believe that at all.
I don't believe that. Yeah, I mean, we talked about Graham Parsons a little bit. He also, his dad was a military officer, and he attended, military academies, and in the last few years of his life, when he went solo, his main collaborator was Emmylou Harris. That's who he worked with on his two acclaimed solo albums, and she was also the daughter of a career Marine Corps officer. And she grew up in Woodbridge, Virginia, which is home to the Harry Diamond Labs Woodbridge facility, this big, huge military research and development facility that just dominates the town that she grew up in.
Well,
familiar with that, by the way?
Oh yeah, and I mean, and Emmylou, Grievous Angel, she was involved in that, I believe. I'm not sure. Is that right? I don't know. But Emmylou Harris, don't say it's not true. Not Emmylou Harris. I know. And well, I'll tell you real quick.
Do you know anything about that Woodbridge facility? I looked it up. I'd never heard of it before, but it's one of the things when I find out where these people were born, I look it up on MapQuest and see what the hell.
I'll tell you what. Honest to goodness, when I was in the bureau in the FBI, and I didn't last long, we were just all young guys then. Woodbridge was talked about, and what's interesting also, as an aside, is that Woodbridge also had a kick and bluegrass station that on the FM dial, which I listen to all the time. But everything in and around Virginia. I mean, Reston and Herndon and Woodbridge and Quantico and all that. I mean, the place is just crawling. It's like Spook Central. I mean,
and that's where most of these. I mean, if you look, that's where most of these people came from. I mean, Morrison, Cass Elliot, and John Phillips all went to high school in Alexandria. Just on and on and on. Zappa was just right nearby there, and just outside of Baltimore. And Tim Buckley, and it just goes. One of the Monkees was. I mean, it's just amazing how many of these people came out of the Virginia suburbs lining Washington D.C. Just time after time after time. Yeah.
When you go to the store, and actually during those days in the bureau, I lived both in Alexandria, the Rose Hill section, and then moved up to. I didn't like Virginia at all, and I don't think they liked me. And I moved up to Laurel, Maryland, where not Rockefeller. What's his name? George. Wallace got popped. We used to go shopping in the area where he was assassinated. Of course, he didn't die. But anyway, that whole section, when you go up to somebody there and you're dealing with someone, you never know who you're talking to. Even if you're in the 7-Eleven, when you just never know who anybody is, because that place is so rife, with military and intelligence type and government type. So, nobody is who they seem they are, and you got to be really careful, or like myself, not be, and then you don't stay very long in the bureau.
Yeah. So Norfolk is a popular place also. There's a lot of these people lived in or around Norfolk, Virginia, which I guess is the home of the world's largest naval base.
That's right. Oh yeah. Listen,
I mean that whole area around there is and yet they all ended up on the other side of the country in this isolated little community up above in the hills above LA, and a huge proportion of them came right from that area that you're talking about, from Arlington, Alexandria, Norfolk. That whole Beltway or whatever they call it there. I've never actually been to the East Coast, so I'm not that. I only know what I see on the maps.
Well, all those communities are outside the Beltway for sure, but I mean, it's just loaded. I mean, you talked about Edgewood, which anybody driving down 95 will. I don't know if it's the signs are still there, but I mean, it said there was an Edgewood Arsenal on 95, and then also when I lived in Laurel, I wasn't that far away from guess where, Fort Meade, and that legacy. So I mean, it's just a different place. But it's so interesting that some of these and a good deal of these rock and roll personages were spun out and wound up in the complete opposite area from where they had been. And that's from the East Coast to the West Coast and to L.A. and also up into San Francisco. And I'm thinking of another name, too. I don't think it's associated with Laurel Canyon, but I mean, John Denver, was he not also a military brat whose name was Dusseldorf?
I believe he was. I haven't really looked into that because it's not directly related. But
Laurel Canyon, right?
I believe he was, and of course, there's been questions raised about his death as well. And we didn't even get into that in this hour about just this phenomenal number of these people or people closely connected to these people who died these very curious deaths at a very young age. It's astounding how many of these people weren't with us very long.
No, didn't live to full bloom.
Not even close.
No,
I mean they were just dropping like flies. It's uncanny.
And also, we'll get into that in another interview if you wish. But it got to be so actually frequent that we kind of like how should I say, sardonically kidded around about who would we nominate for the all-time Dead band. And, and I don't mean Grateful Dead. I mean, it was just like there was just so many dropping off. I mean, like, so what's Heaven's band? In fact, I think, who was that? Bill Medley did a song about that, about all the people who had died, and it would be up in heaven or wherever they go and play. But, yeah, I mean, it was just like, what's going on? And that whole era, I mean, you were, probably, 8 to 10 years old. But, I mean, we had just gotten out of high school, and we're looking at all this completely crazy stuff. But it's, between bombings on campuses, and, of course, Kent State had happened, Woodstock wasn't bad, Monterey did not work out well, and all these deaths.
Altamont.
Altamont is the one that's most infamous, right?
Yeah.
It is in Monterey, you got that right. And, we just sat there and we watched all this stuff, and it's amazing how a young person just kind of assimilates this or makes some kind of sense or just blocks it off in a compartment of their mind. Because when I look back at that, if that were happening today, who knows? And we may see that happen. But back there, I don't know how we made sense of it unless we just ignored it and tried to go on with our lives, because I don't think there was a crazier time than the mid-'60s and the mid-'70s.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was. There were just people dropping left and right, especially the Laurel Canyon crowd, and the Manson murders were just, which were very closely connected to the Laurel Canyon scene, were just really just the tip of the iceberg. There was just, there was 2 girls' bodies dumped in Laurel Canyon in the late 60s, I think in 1969, 2 of them in 1 year that were just dumped basically in the brush on the side of the road. One of them, the daughter of a intelligence operative, of course, and the other one never identified. And I mean, there were just bodies turning up everywhere, just not just of the rich and famous, like, Hendrix and Joplin and Morrison and Parsons, but, a lot of other people connected to the scene, the girlfriends of both David Crosby and Graham Nash, Jackson Brown's wife, and I mean, just on and on and on and on. It's just uncanny.
And uncanny is definitely the best word we can use for that, but it was strange, and very strange, and to this day, it exists as the same. All right, Dave, listen, thanks for the time that you spent with us. Again, we're talking with Dave McGowan. The website is davesweb.cnchost.com. That link will be up next to the audio, no big deal. The series we're talking about is Inside the LC, the strange but mostly true story of Laurel Canyon and the birth of the hippie generation. What? Are you laughing there?
I was laughing. The title derives from the fact that when you're looking at anything concerning Hollywood, it is very, very difficult to sort out fact from legend. Hence the title, The Strange But Mostly True. Because I mean, I don't know if you've ever dove into the dirt of Hollywood, but man, it is just it's not easy to navigate through. There's just so much, or so many legends and myths, and trying to figure out, and a lot of stuff that is true that is written off as legend and myth, to divert attention away from it, and some stuff that really is legend and myth, and it's very hard to sort out the truth from the fantasy when you're dealing with Hollywood, because everything's a friggin' fantasy in Hollywood.
Well, they named it after the wood of the holly, which was a favorite wood used by the magicians for their wands. So, I think the naming of that part of L.A. is not unintentional. Let's put it that way.
I didn't know that. It's interesting.
Yeah, well, there's one down in Florida, too, and somebody said, so what does that mean? But apparently Hollywood, Florida was supposed to be the film capital east, which never happened. So there was an idea to do the same thing out in California that they did here, and they hence the name Hollywood. So, but yeah, it comes from the wood of the holly, which was the Druids' wand's composition.
Well, that is appropriate then.
Oh, it certainly is. And so, and also reminds you too of like the movie Chinatown at the end. Although it's not a Hollywood thing, it's an LA thing based on fact with the water wars. And of course, when they had the last scene, the cop tells Nicholson, "Jake, it's Chinatown."
Yeah.
Nothing makes sense. Don't try to.
Well, he was a big part of the Laurel Canyon scene too. I haven't even got into all that yet. The whole Young Turks angle with Peter Fonda and Hopper and Bruce Dern and Jack Nicholson and Warren Beatty and all these guys. They were a big part of that scene as well.
Yeah. No, and you're getting there, and we won't jump ahead of you. So,
with Easy Rider and The Trip and all of that. You remember all the stupid exploitation movies?
Oh, absolutely.
A lot of people probably don't know that Jack Nicholson actually wrote the screenplay for The Trip about an LSD trip, and also wrote the screenplay for the Monkees movie Head. Strangely enough.
Well, I was going to go there, and strangely enough, if you look real close, when they had that restaurant scene, who's being ushered out of the restaurant but Jack Nicholson?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he had a cameo in that. I think Hopper did too.
Hopper. Right. Hopper was also with him.
All of these people were very closely intertwined. The music scene with the sort of young Hollywood scene, and
right.
Yeah, it was all just one big happy family living there in the canyons. All the sons and daughters of the military intelligence complex running around bumping each other off, which, if that's what they want to do, it's none of my business, I guess.
Well, I tell you what, with this, you've opened up a can of worms, but I tell you what, it's certainly an interesting can of worms, and we're not done with it by any means. So thanks for delving into that area, and who knows where this is going to lead. As you said, it has many, many tentacles, and hopefully you'll come back in a week or so. Is that all right, Dave?
Oh, yeah, definitely, yeah.
All right, listen, thanks for being with us on this weekend, and you take care of yourself, and look forward to talking to you soon.
Okay, you too, thanks.
All right, bye-bye, Dave.
Bye.
Yeah, we don't need no stinking heroes, but we could use some good information, and that's why I hope you folks tune in to Beyond the Grassy Knoll as we rebirth a second show in this year 2008. We have with us again today, after having done a pre-record, we have Dave McGowan with us, who's working on a very interesting and very, I should say, arousing series called Inside the LC, the strange but mostly true story of Laurel Canyon and the birth of the hippie generation. We did a pre-record, as we said. He's on live now. A lot of you folks might want to ask questions and make some comments. We've got a ton of stuff that came through, emails to that effect, and I think we'll start the show off with that, if that's okay. So, Dave, thanks a lot for coming back, and I would say you got a live one here.
Yeah, it seems to be taking on a life of its own. This is actually, I think, the third interview I've done in the last week or so, and I got two more lined up. All of a sudden, I'm a very popular guy.
Well,
which paradoxically is slowing me down on finishing up this series now, because I'm just getting inundated with emails and interview requests, and it's kind of weird. I'm not used to being such a popular guy.
Well, this too shall pass.
I'm used to working in obscurity, and just not having anybody really, not too many people other than my devoted followers, my small cult of devoted followers who pay much attention to what I have to say. So it's kind of weird to have this sudden popularity.
Well, then good for you in a sense, because obviously when you put something out like that, no matter how people feel, I guess, about politics, Dave, no matter how they feel about Flight 93, blah, 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 everybody in my cohort, which you were probably a little bit just beyond. I mean, like I said, I got 9 years on you. But, I mean, you understand what that was all about. Anyway, a lot of those folks actually do get it. I guess we've lived long enough that we realize we've been lied to. I think that happens with age. I think this has been happening for some time. The older folks always said stuff to the younger folks, and I will admit, I listened to it and looked at them and go, yeah, okay, Grandpa, take a hike. He was right. I was wrong. But along with music, though, this is a very special thing. Growing up inside of it, I thought this was a very organic thing, and we're going to get into that definition of it. I'm going to ask you for your definition of it, because some of the questions that came in wanted to know about whether or not this whole thing was rigged, or whether partly it was rigged, et cetera, et cetera. But let me, if you want to give us any comments with regard to that, by all means, because if you don't, or after you do, I'd like to pass some comments and questions by you.
Well, I certainly grew up believing that it was organic. Like I think I mentioned, it's getting hard for me to remember what I've covered in these various forums now. But I think we talked before about that I was born in 1960 and actually sort of came of age in the mid-late 70s. But I always considered myself a child of the 60s, and that was the music that I listened to and the fashions that I wore. And, you know, I mean, I was wildly adept with my peers when I went to college, because it was like I started college I went to junior college, and I transferred to UCLA, I think, in like 1980 or 1981, which was the dawn of the Reagan era. And the whole campus was like filled with all these preppies, you know, wearing Izod Lacoste shirts and topside. And I mean, it was like the official uniform. And here's this 60s throwback wandering the campus, you know, in bare feet and long hair. So I totally bought into it. You know, pretty much my entire life up until maybe like, you know, 10 years ago, I started having my doubts and, you know, started reading things like Martin Lee's Acid Dreams and, you know, various other works that kind of called into question, you know, just how much of it was organic. But I always believe that at least the music, the soundtrack of the 60s was real and organic. And unfortunately, in the last year and a half, I've even begun to seriously question that, and that's sort of what brought about this series, which I began with a quote from Stephen Still's song, "For What It's Worth." There's something happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear. And I have to say that after close to a year and a half now of digging through this, it's still not, it still ain't exactly clear, but I'm hoping that by the time I complete this journey, it will have all come into some kind of a focus.
All right. Fair enough, and let me run by you. This is a comment, and, you know, I'm not saying I agree with it or not. It doesn't make a difference. I mean, this is what the folks are thinking, and let me run this by you.
Okay.
That you guys started talking about a lot of these musicians from the 60s that were children of people in the military. It was real cool that you mentioned Jim Morrison. Before his name was even brought up, I said to myself out loud, yeah, such musicians like Jim Morrison. Then you guys mentioned his name. However, I had no clue that Jim Morrison's father was involved in the Gulf of Tonkin incident. That was real news to me. If this is true, then Morrison obviously knew what really happened there leading to the Vietnam War. Now, I'll stop right there. I don't really think he might have, but Dave, do you have any information to the fact that he did? And if so, does that make a difference?
No, I do not have any specific information that he knew. I mean, he knew obviously that his dad was deployed in that arena. I mean, he basically saw him off. I have a picture of him on the bridge
on the bridge
ship with his father in January of 1964, not long before he shipped off to go over to that part of the world. The incident occurred in August of '64, so I mean it was just literally just months before the ship set sail. So he knew his father was there. He knew that his father was the commanding officer of the fleet that was there. So I mean, you know, I suppose he could have deduced that his dad was directly involved, but I don't have any specific information that.
Well, no, I mean, and like I said, I can understand the individual running with that, and he might in fact be true. So let me finish up with his next paragraph. He said, more reason to prove that he was definitely murdered. All right, now hold that for a second. He probably spoke too much. Imagine being someone working in intelligence and knowing that there was a real famous musician out there in the world whose father was there at the Gulf of Tonkin. Obviously, this man's son would know the truth of what really happened, and his popularity would obviously pose a threat to national security. If this is true about Morrison, then it is final. He was definitely murdered. That's just to name a few, of course, what the people are talking about. But again, we really can't say. Well, I mean, you tell me. Was Morrison whacked, or did he do himself?
Well, to my mind, there's two possibilities. If he did indeed die, when we're told he did, and bearing in mind that there was never any body produced, there was no autopsy, there was no service, they didn't even announce his death until he was allegedly in the ground. He was buried within 4 days, supposedly, despite the fact that he was a U.S. national and a very famous one. they cleared all the hurdles somehow and got him got everything done in his body in the ground within 4 days before it was even announced that he was dead. So by the time they had announced that he was gone, it was basically, but there's nothing to see here, don't don't bother coming around because he's already buried. There's no, nobody ever saw the body. There was no autopsy done, no service held. So the first question is, did he even die in Paris? Which is an open question in my mind. But if he did in fact die over there, then I would say that there's a very, very, very high chance that he was murdered, yeah.
Also, you have to understand something as we go into this season, especially in Florida, which we've not had to worry too much about. But as dry as we've been, it is now the hurricane season. However, I just want to say to you folks on the East Coast, there may be some kind of disruption due to storms on the East Coast. This is something that we might have to live with if those things happen to visit us in Florida on Wednesday. So if you've got some issues that you might think are contributed to the weather, they in fact are. Anybody else who's trying to listen to the show, you can, if you're having a problem, go ahead and refresh and try to click in that way and tell me how you make out. Yeah, we really don't know about Morrison, but of course this isn't just an isolated case, but we'll get back to that a little bit later.
Yeah. Morrison had also, he had told a number of interviewers, he had talked about sort of reinventing himself. He said he could see himself having a radical career change and sort of transforming into the same person. I mean, the guy was just, he was a bit of a changeling, and he had talked about basically just sort of reemerging as a completely different individual, completely different profession and everything else. So I think there's a lot of open questions about whether Jim Morrison really died over there in Paris.
All right. We also have a caller, and let's take them now, Dave. Hello, caller. You're on. Oh.
No.
I got a message from the producer saying prank call, they are gone. That's okay. Let me just say this now, folks. If you do want to call in, you can do so on 333-9009. And when you call in, you're not going to get somebody who's going to hook you in as a screener. But if you call and then you start to hear the show, you are in, and we will get to you. So you're not going to hear anybody say anything to you. You hear the show and you call in, you're there. So be that as it may. Also, let me just say this also, that you can also send emails to Vyzygoth@hotmail.com, Vyzygoth@verizon.net. You can use MSN-IM, the messenger, and that would be Vyzygoth. And again, we're hearing from people that things are a little crazy, but this is summertime. Well, for the most part, summertime in a lot of places in America, and certainly that is the case here in Florida. So, things will happen with the weather. If you get bounced out, it's probably due to that. Come back in if you can. If you're having a hard time listening to the conversation, then go ahead and refresh. Okay, and that's what I'm getting for the most part here. So, Dave, I have to do a little bit of maintenance here because everything's coming through on my screen. But on to a second item, if you would. And this is from a listener from over in Paris. Let's see. Okay, here's a couple of questions that being posed. Dave mentioned that only 2 years ago he was completely unaware of Laurel Canyon. Be interesting to know what tipped him off in that direction, his path to discovery, so to say. What do you think?
It was actually a book that my eldest daughter got for me for Christmas, not this past Christmas, but the one before. A book called Laurel Canyon, written by a guy named Michael Walker. It was fairly newly released at the time, and it covers the Laurel Canyon scene. It kind of introduced me to the fact that this sort of remote, isolated neighborhood in LA had been home to all this was just amazing array of musicians, and there was a lot of little clues, a lot of little warning bells that went off in my head as I was reading this, sort of reading between the lines. And so ever since then, I've been reading everything that I can get my hands on about that era, just every book and magazine article and web post and everything else that I can get my hands on, ferreting out all the little sordid details that are, sort of hidden in the mainstream accounts of that era.
But that had to be something also, Dave, that you weren't really, you didn't need all that kind of priming. I mean, it was kind of probably there anyway, and this gave you a bit of a little bit of a trigger to go do it?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. But, I mean, the thing that just instantly drew me to the story and that was so fascinating to me is that it's so close to home, I mean.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
So close to me, and it's somewhere that I can actually go and visit. I mean, I can jump in my car and in 15, 20 minutes be at these places, seeing them for real, how they look today, and sort of getting a feel and a vibe for the place. So I was just instantly drawn to the story by a number of factors. And one of the key ones of which is that it happened right in my backyard here, and I didn't even know about it. That's
that's the way things go.
Yeah, I was kind of offended by that in a way that, I've been researching this. I've lived here all my life, and I've been researching this stuff for a good number of years, and yet they pulled the wool over my eyes on something that happened right behind my back, so that's...
How dare they? I know.
Yeah, exactly, how dare they.
But it's always in your own neighborhood. You don't know what the heck is going on.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to go on with some questions and comments from Erky out in Paris. I'd like to hear both of your views on the relationship between the organic and inorganic. In other words, something was very real and authentic during the 60s, organic, and something was contrived, inorganic. How did one influence the other, and to what level? I'll stop right there. There's a third part to this, but you tell me what your take is, because I came to this of late also as to what might have been, rigged. What do you think about what really truly was an evolution, if you would, or a revolution, and what might have been also either injected into it or, something other that turned it down a side street?
Any more and more, I'm of the opinion that what we think of as the 60s counterculture, which is the whole hippie, flower child, freak, whatever term you want to apply to it, movement, I'm really leaning heavily towards believing that entire thing was a fraud, every aspect of it from beginning to end, and that there was a whole series of very real movements that were budding in the 1960s and in the early 60s, a budding anti-war movement, a budding civil rights movement, a budding women's rights movement, a budding Black Power movement, through the Panthers and whatnot, and I think most if not all of those were very legitimate, and this whole sort of hippie thing just kind of moved in and overshadowed all of that, and sort of became identified in people's minds with what the 60s were all about, and so I think that whole aspect of it was a sham. What? That makes any sense.
Well, you make a good point. When you went back, and I think you quoted, I don't know if it was Abby Hoffman or whatever, saying, the anti-war protesters were protesting the war in Vietnam before the hippie generation or the flower power children came on the scene. Now, that is not necessarily exclusive of what you said, so can we assume also that the real hardcore political elements were against the war, and then all of a sudden the love children come through and either kind of help or hinder what's going on? What's your take on that as far as what your research revealed?
Yeah, I mean, basically the way that I understand it is that there was an anti-war movement underway, largely on college campuses, with professors and their students and whatnot, and but respectable people. And then the hippies kind of came in, and all of a sudden all the focus was on them, and they became identified as sort of the protest movement. And I think that was a very calculated move, because it's a lot easier to discredit and marginalize and a group of these long-haired, strangely dressed hippies with their peace signs and their peculiar music, and it was just, they were so foreign to mainstream America. They just looked like people from another world or something, and that made it much easier to marginalize what the anti-war movement that developed, because all the focus was on them. The media presented them as the face of the anti-war movement, the whole hippie generation, but they weren't. Or at least they weren't the ones that originally got the ball rolling, and would have kept it rolling.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody always says that the hippies stopped the war, the 60s counterculture stopped the war, and yada yada, but they didn't.
No.
It carried on for an entire decade after the hippies came along. It didn't end for an entire decade after almost close to 60,000 Americans had been shipped home in pine boxes. They didn't stop. I think they very much contributed to the extension of the war by diluting and taking a lot of the wind out of the sails of what would have been a very strong anti-war movement if they hadn't have appeared on the scene.
I'm going to reserve a comment, but I want to go to the last component of this email. The individual writes, the idea that Jimi Hendrix and Jim Morrison were intelligence agents is absurd, at least to me. The idea that intelligence agents enter their lives is not. How do both of you see the interaction? Go ahead, Dave.
Well, I agree that the idea that intelligence operatives entered their lives is not absurd. But these people frequently kill their own. Just because somebody gets whacked, it doesn't mean that they were one of the good guys.
No.
So I haven't really gotten into Jimi Hendrix too much at all. All I mentioned was really the unusual circumstances of his death. He was not a huge part of the Laurel Canyon scene. He identified with San Francisco, although he did spend time in Laurel Canyon, and according to some reports, he had maintained a home there for a while. But I haven't really focused that much on him. Jim Morrison, I think, is much more suspect than Jimi Hendrix as far as whether he was a covert agent or not.
I'll have some more information for you that I want to run by it, but I want to at least vent what came to us through the listeners, because obviously, that's why we do the show. So let's do this. Now, I don't know if you want to go here, but I do want to go here. And, however you want to deal with it, that's fine. I just think it needs airing. We do a lot of things on symbology, Dave, and the bigger picture about, spiritual forces, if you will. I know that's kind of open-ended, but I'm going to just throw this out at you. Somebody wrote who was in Freemasonry, and he said, when I took my third degree in Masonry, we went through the story of Hiram Abiff and the three unworthy workers. And he goes on and on and on. But, I don't want to go through the whole, not that it's tedious whatsoever, but I want to get down to the kernel of what he was talking about. And that is, in Masonry, the Laurel branch, L-A-U-R-E-L, the Laurel, the bush, has a significant meaning in Freemasonry. Now, let me ask you this. I don't know if you've come upon it. I don't know if you will come upon it, or if you want to completely, dispense with it. But are we looking at a little something going on in Laurel Canyon that might have been dealing with a quasi-secret society? What's your thoughts on that?
I haven't really looked at it from that angle. I'm not familiar at all with the what you were talking about.
The symbology of Laurel, yeah.
Yeah, that has not come up in any regard in what I've read so far. So I haven't not looked at it at all from that angle.
All right. I'm wondering if that will come up, but also what I'm wondering is, as you go deeper into the history of Laurel Canyon, which you did in part 2 to a certain extent, when you get back to Gene Harlow and Paul Byrne and such, I'm wondering if it even goes back to that. Who knows if you can uncover that? I don't know that you want to do that, or if it'll pop up all by itself. but I'm wondering if inlaid in the history of Laurel Canyon, if there wasn't a little something there that had a wink and a nod.
It's quite possible. I mean, I never know what's going to come up in this story, to be honest with you.
I know.
Last time I talked to you, you asked me about John Denver. Are you the one? I think you're the one.
Yeah, we talked about, Dusseldorf, and...
Yeah, and I said, I haven't really looked at that because he's not a part of, he hasn't come up in the story at all. Well, no sooner did I say that, the very next day he came up in the story, and sure enough, he moved to L.A. in 1964, and he actually joined a band that Roger McGowan, I believe it was, of the Byrds had been in. Same band as one of the Byrds, and turns out he was. He was present, supposedly, according to some reports, he was present at the infamous riot on the Sunset Strip, and I think it was November of 1966. And yeah, so he actually, come to find out, no sooner had I told you that he wasn't a part of it, than I came to find out that he was a part of it, and you were right, he's son of a career Air Force officer, I believe it was. And like a lot of other people in the stories, there's a lot of open questions about his death. So yeah, he fits right. Well, he fits right in with the rest of these. Same family background, same mysterious death. It's amazing how many people are rolled up into this story. People you wouldn't even, Glenn Campbell was very much a part of the scene, and these people that you wouldn't even, I know. It's just weird. The story just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and I don't even know what to do with it at this point. There's just so many tentacles pointing out in so many directions. It's like which leads do I follow, and how far do I follow them? Because then they branch off into other, So.
Well, in fairness to you, if I remember correctly, you did not dispense with the fact that John Denver might have been part of it, but you said, good point, and we left it at that, and lo and behold, days after we spoke, you find out that, in fact, he was involved in the LC as well. And we've got some more emails coming in. I want to put this in a kind of an order where we can, I guess, do it in a way where it isn't hopscotch, And Karen, I've got your email, and I definitely want to get to it because I want to know about Manson. I'm going to hold that off if we can, but we definitely want to address it. Also, Dave, we got this. We got it from Larry. He said, I just finished listening to the show on Laurel Canyon in the 60s today, and it blew my mind. Well, gee, that's where it all came from. I had never given much thought to rock stars and their heritage of military intelligence connections. I knew about Morrison, but chalked it off to rebellion against his father, that he, lied about his parents being dead since he was ashamed of his father being a high-ranking military officer. Today, when all these icons of the 60s rock counterculture turn out to have military intelligence connections, then Dave's question was very appropriate. My question here, I guess, is this. What do you suppose the odds are that all of that just came purely together by chance?
I think the odds are astronomical, to be honest with you. I haven't gotten into it yet. I'm going to in a future installment, but I can give you a little sneak preview. And that is another aspect of the story is the Hollywood Young Turks, what were known as the Young Turks angle, because they were very much the young Hollywood stars who were also very much a part of the Laurel Canyon scene.
What year was that when the Young Turks had their bones?
Like from 1965 on, it was, Peter Fonda, Bruce Dern, Jack Nicholson, Warren Beatty, Jane Fonda. Well, she wasn't a young Turk. I guess she would be a Turkette or something. There's this whole group of people that also Canyon. Peter Fonda had a place there. Dennis Hopper did. Sal Mineo lived right at the mouth of the canyon. So that this whole little clique of young Hollywood actors who were making the scene on the Sunset Strip clubs and were living in Laurel Canyon and making movies in Laurel Canyon. I don't know if we talked about that last time. the Monkees movie.
Oh,
Head,
when Nicholson's in there, yep.
Yeah, and The Trip and Easy Rider. Those movies all sort of came out of Laurel Canyon. They were very much part of the scene. And I've been looking into their past, and some of them have even more troubling connections than the rock stars that they were hanging out with. I'll give one example: Bruce Dern. He co-starred with Fonda in The Trip, and he was very much a part of that scene. And his uncle on his mother's side, his mother was Jean McLeish. His uncle was Archibald McLeish, who was Skull and Bones, class of 1915, the year before Prescott Bush, who was class of 1916. And his grandfather on his dad's side was a former Secretary of War, which was what we call the Secretary of Defense
now. Yep.
Slightly more honest times. And his godparents were First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt and Adlai Stevenson, the guy who twice lost to Eisenhower, yeah. So I mean, his family, he comes directly from this whole stew of Skull and Bones and Department of Defense, and I mean, so and that's true also of several of the others. So it was not just the musicians who had gathered in the canyon who were the offspring of the military intelligence complex. It was all the young Hollywood actors that they were hanging out with as well. So I mean, at some point you got to say how many coincidences does it take to make a conspiracy, And to me, I think we passed the threshold a long time ago on this story, So that would be, I guess, my answer. Yeah, it's way too much for me to accept as all coincidental.
I'm just going to enter this now because this is about you, not about me. Although I was there, and anyway, I mean, I saw it all. I went through a bunch of stages. But the one thing that I now question when I look back, and when we talk about it now, is that the whole introduction also of LSD, I think, is very, very interesting. Ken Kesey, who I revered as a writer, he's the author of Sometimes a Great Notion and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Of course, he is the subject, Tom Wolfe's the Let Your Kool-Aid acid test, when they had acid. And it was not against the law because nobody knew they had it, although, of course, it is suspected that the Army intelligence created it. And, of course, they had the concerts out on the coast where the Warlocks played, who later became the Grateful Dead.
Yeah, nice name, huh?
Yeah, well, there you go. And then, of course, the famous trip on the bus with Neil Cassidy driving as they go across the coast. And they eventually end on the East Coast, and they were talking to Leary, and then came back. But, the one thing, and I don't want to go into it now, so I'll just leave it there, but, I mean, if we can go to that later on about the whole introduction to LSD, that's interesting, too. But let me go to that.
Oh, yeah, and the fact that it remained legal for as long as it did during that time, when there was supposedly all this harassment and everything going on, and yet LSD remained perfectly legal.
Yeah, I mean, the cops couldn't arrest you because there was no law against it.
You couldn't smoke a joint, but you could drop acid,
Well, you get your ass busted for smoking a joint, but if you're doing acid, they just let you alone.
Yeah, I mean, that seems very odd, doesn't it, in retrospect, that they wouldn't have immediately clamped down on that? I mean... Yeah,
and that's why I'm saying, but I think you're going to come to that also at another time, but just to kind of whet the appetites of people, that's the one thing that I think really bothered me, how straight up Kesey was. And of course, because Kesey had worked on a psych ward, which gave him the fodder for the book One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Yes, yeah.
He also studied at Stanford with the Stanford Research Institute, and I can't hook them both up, but it's kind of interesting as well. But that for another day. Now, we got a comment. It's fascinating regarding the links between these people. Someone knew someone who worked with someone else, and in the end, there are often bad endings to people, mysterious deaths and such. The fact that so much of the music was so good, agreed, so brilliant in many cases, agreed, was the music itself generally contrived as some part of some plan, in quotes, to change society. I would love to hear more about the parents or other family members, even in some cases the celebrity themselves, being involved in intelligence. what has been the overall goal and has it been met? And lastly, was Manson suspect as well as strange intelligence connections? All right, that's a lot of stuff and probably not all for this moment. But let's do this. First of all, I thought the music was excellent. I think it was.
I firmly believe it. I still have the records in my collection. I mean, I mean, for a very long time after that, there wasn't anything worth listening to on the music. I mean, the music of the 70s and 80s was pretty much wretched, you know. I think the music was very good, and it stood the test of time. To what degree it was contrived, I couldn't really tell you, but you know, I would definitely agree that the music was it has definitely stood up to the test of time, in my opinion.
And mine too. And again, but you know what this goes back to. And Dave, I don't want to spend any time on this. If sometime in the future you want to do something, that's fine, because we can't open this oyster right here. But I mean, we have treated the issue whether or not the Beatles were handled by a composer of some note who has gone like below the radar screen, and that would be Theodore Adorno, and whether or not they got together in England, because Adorno supposedly fled Germany prior to World War II, and John Colin and his Conspirators Hierarchy and some others put the Beatles with Adorno together so that they were trying to get something done. Now, that's like for another time. Just leave that where it is. But the fact that there is some kind of suggestion that rock and roll was being handled in some fashion. But, like, again, not for another time. But moving on to another question, and let me get back to this again. Okay. What about, if we can, as far as you've gone with this, let's just kind of flip over, because there's a couple of people that want to know how much Manson had a hand in what was taking place in that particular era.
Well, he was very much a part of the scene. I mean, virtually all of the big name musicians that came out of there in that era knew him. Most of them don't like to admit it, but you know, some of them have. One of the guys from Canned Heat admitted that they used to party with the Manson family. You know, he auditioned for Neil Young. He auditioned for Jerry Garcia of the Grateful Dead. He auditioned for Dennis Wilson. And he was recorded by Dennis Wilson. He was recorded by Terry Melcher, Doris Day's son, who was producer of the Byrds and various other bands. And, I mean, he was known to hang out at Moss's house. He's been reported to have been at John Phillips' house. Some of his followers reportedly lived at the log cabin that Frank Zappa was the ringmaster at, you know, late in 1968, according to Ed Sanders' book, The Family. I mean, he was all over the place. His fingerprints are all over that whole music scene. You know, I mean, you find references to him constantly throughout. He or one of his followers, particularly Bobby Beausoleil. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce it. We were discussing that earlier, but which means beautiful son, by the way. He was very much a part of the scene as well. He actually lived in Laurel Canyon for a while and was the original rhythm guitarist for the band that became Love when they were known as the Grassroots. Oh, yeah. And Tex Watson, who was the leader of the expedition that went to the Cielo Drive house, he lived in Laurel Canyon on Wonderland Avenue, and yeah, I mean they're just everywhere. They're all over the story. You can't. It's unavoidable. You just keep bumping into one or more members of the Manson family around every turn, pretty much.
It is interesting, though, because it almost seemed, though, he was at least dignified to some extent as having a little talent. I don't think, I mean, from what I can remember, and this is a long time ago, I mean, the Wilsons from the Beach Boys weren't necessarily blowing him off. I'm just sure that, you know, when he came into your living room, he was kind of scary.
I would imagine, except that he always brought a huge gaggle of women with him, you know, and, you know, from the descriptions, that I've read, I mean, he just basically brought this troop of young girls with him that would just pretty much do and service anyone that you know, Manson wanted to get on the good side of. So, you know.
All right. So in other words, he had a way of he had a calling card, didn't he?
He had a calling card, yeah, a calling card that was very attractive to Dennis Wilson and his two sidekicks, Terry Melcher and Greg Jacobson, which was, yeah, these just young, attractive, adoring women who would cater to their every whim.
All right, I just want to let people know, too, we've been talking with Dave McGowan. The website, Dave, is davesweb.cnchost.com. But, you know, it always, I mean, the link always goes up. Your link always goes up with the audio. Not a big deal. But if you're listening right now, if you want to do that, you go to davesweb.cnchost.com. You can pick up all the newsletters. They're right there at the top. The website's also known as the Center for an Informed. For what? An informed what?
America.
America, okay. That's when my printer stopped. Oh, classy, isn't it? All right, no problem with that.
Yeah, there's a couple, I should have parts 5 and 6 up in the next few days, hopefully. They're nearing completion, so.
Well, I don't think anybody's in a hurry as long as, you know, it comes out and it comes out right. I mean.
Some of my readers are. I keep getting emails. What happened? You were putting them out, you know, and now all of a sudden, I'm like, just give me a chance. I got to reboot. I got a lot of material to dig through and organize, and, you know, I want to make sure I get it right. I mean, there's so much bad information in all the mainstream accounts. I mean, you read something in one book, and the next day you read a different version in another book that completely contradicts the first version that you read. And I mean, trying to sort out the truth from the Hollywood mythology and legend making is I want to make sure I get it as accurate as possible.
You know, I don't want to waste a whole bunch of minutes. And we got something else from 3 people that kind of resonate with the same question. I'm going to throw that to you. And I don't know, you know, I don't know we're going to have this time. But, I mean, that's why I say the series goes on. And as long as you're okay at your convenience, we can go on and you know, delve into some of these things. But, you know, I mean, when all this stuff was going on, I'm like 17 years old. But I'm following it through the Daily News, you know, when I lived in the New York area. And you look at this stuff, and, you know, to this day, you know, I try to think back as to how I just, like, assimilated all this stuff, or maybe I just offed it, because it was so bizarre. And of course, the Vietnam thing was going on. I really do believe that all of us just took this stuff in, we threw it away, and we went on with our lives, because there's no world. We were going to get deep into this and not get brain damage. So, you know, I'm just amazed at all that passed through us at that time. As much as people today, you know, yak about martial law and police state, that all might be happening. But, you know, we really have to take a look. I don't know how you feel about this, but, I mean, I look back to 70 to 75, and I'm like, I don't even know how we get through this. I mean, if you want to crack in on that, by all means, but, I mean, it can get a lot stranger.
Yeah, it's a very strange world we live in. The older I get, the more I realize that, and the deeper you dig down these rabbit holes, the more you realize that it definitely is a very strange. I mean, I don't know that anything. There's very little that seems that can shock me anymore. You know, it's you know, the weird thing about the whole hippie movement is that it just seemed to happen so fast, you know, and I mean, how does that happen? That, you know, I mean, it had to start somewhere, you know, I mean, how do all these kids just all of a sudden end up adopting this completely different lifestyle that, you know, I mean, different hairstyles, different clothing styles, different music, and I mean, how did that just happen so quickly that all these kids just all of a sudden woke up one day with long hair and bad clothes, you know.
But Dave, the thing is, that happened without VHS. I mean, whatever it is, the hell is it called? You know, I don't know. What's all the rock and roll things on, you know, on the MTV? Okay, this happened without MTV, without BET, and all these videos. This happened without wall-to-wall, 24/7 TV. This happened without that. That's the thing I think is most interesting, is because they didn't have that medium to get to everybody all the time, where the mom and dad were watching what you were watching on TV.
Yeah. I mean, we definitely weren't all tied in as much to this, to where we're all, the entire country, every remote corner of the country is now fed the same daily diet of crap, from our news and entertainment media and through the internet and whatnot. And yet it still just sprung up. I mean, just out of nowhere, all of a sudden we had this whole what very quickly became the largest countercultural movement in American history, just sort of out of nowhere almost, and it is very odd that it happened like that, I mean, why this sort of such a drastic countercultural movement, I mean, where everything about them was sort of foreign to small town, mainstream America. I mean, everything, their look, their music, their attitude, and I mean, yeah, it's odd. It's very odd in retrospect that
and let's hopefully revisit that in time to come. We got a couple of comments. One from Carpet Max said, "Hippie's got kids, married, and bored, and turned collectivist." Well, I can't argue with that.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Also, we got another comment. Doesn't Shirley MacLaine have nebulous family military origins or connections?
Shirley MacLaine is Warren Beatty's brother, obviously,
right.
And he was again one of the young Turks that hung out with that crowd. His father was supposedly a psychiatrist, psychologist, or a psychology professor, or something like that. But I mean, he moved around in an unusual way. I think he was born in Alexandria, Virginia, I think. And
what a surprise.
Yeah, and then they moved to Norfolk, Virginia, the largest naval base in the world. And then after that they moved to, I think, Arlington, Virginia, the home of the Pentagon. And so, I mean, his whole early life was spent hopping around between these little, military intelligence suburbs of Washington, D.C. So even though, his father didn't officially work for the military, but, you got to sort of, a lot of times you got to kind of read between
the lines. Yeah.
One of the things that surprised me really about this story is that so many of these people's military intelligence connections are right out there up front, because usually you do have to read between the lines. I mean, CIA and all its affiliated spy organizations, they're secret they operate in secrecy. That's by definition. So they don't advertise, their membership. So, usually you have to read between the lines and look, where did this person grow up, or, where did the family move around to, and what circles did they, travel and whatnot. But, so Warren Beatty's kind of one of those cases where, and Shirley MacLaine also, obviously, because she's his sister, it's one of those where you kind of have to read between the lines. But, the amazing thing to me is that so much of the story, you don't have to read between the lines. And if there's that many people there that have open military and intelligence connections, then how many of the other ones had hidden, military and intelligence connections?
I tell you what, we got two heavy-duty questions. I'm going to ask you to just give, if you could, a cursory answer to them both. We can visit this later on, because I think you're going to come upon this if you haven't already, but we'll revisit this. One message was they had mind control, subliminal psychic messages put on records. Preston Nichols says this. He participated in this at Montauk. All right, that's one statement. Is there a possibility, whether it was backmasked or whatever, that there were certain things in there? I don't know. I mean, are we looking at something that was triggering to a generation that might have been medicated to some extent?
It's possible. I have not really looked in any great depth at that aspect at all. I remember when I was a kid, the big backward masking controversy when I was, I don't know, probably in my young teens or something. I remember there was a big thing about it. In Led Zeppelin's records. I can remember me and my friends trying to spin a Zeppelin, old 33 and a third vinyl record backwards on a
Woo! Make it talk.
To see if we could hear, and a Beatles one too, to see if we could hear Paul's Dead or whatever the hell was supposed to be.
I know.
I remember doing it, yeah, but as an adult and as a researcher, I have not really, I haven't really looked into that aspect of it.
All right, and that might come in time. And also, I do find it interesting though that they would plant that stuff in there, but that might have been a really great marketing scheme later on to get everybody to buy back albums. We can't overlook the fact that was a really good marketing gimmick.
Yeah, I remember Stairway to Heaven supposedly had that. I can't remember.
You, My Sweet Satan, yeah.
Is that what it was? I remember playing the thing. And yeah,
I can't hear it.
And Revolution number 9 or something was supposed to say I buried Paul.
Paul is dead.
Yeah, well, we checked into it. I remember checking into it. I don't remember if we heard anything or not. It probably depended on our chemical balance at the
The thing is, some of us never checked out. Okay, we got another good one for you here. This will only take about 3 hours to discuss. I love it. I wish these people would call in, but they don't. Anyway, I'm okay. Whether they're shy or they're at work, it's fine. Boy, I tell you, this is a good one. Are either of you familiar with the lore that early in the Third Reich, German scientists experimented with Nepalese and other indigenous shamanistic chants, combining them with repetitive percussive patterns in a quest to develop early NLP, which would be neuro-linguistic programming, and brainwashing techniques? It was suspected that they created proto-rock and rock and roll music before being ordered to shelve their findings. Might their research and results have been British war booty for Tavistock to perfect? Actually, Dave, that makes a lot of sense if you've come across some of the information that I've come across, the listeners have. But, this is what I was saying to you about whether or not it was true about Adorno and the Beatles. Had they crafted music along, the lines of trying to influence young people, and I would have to say this, right now, with the longevity that hip-hop has had along with rap, I mean, I got to think that there's something in there. So I won't say anything more. You know where I'm going with that. Do you want to address whether or not, they built in some things that deal with, alpha, beta states of the brain?
I couldn't really speak to that. I'm not familiar with the specific line of research that
or he or she or whatever, yeah.
Whatever was referencing there. I mean, I know that the CIA and probably British intelligence did, from what I understand, get a hold of all of secure all of the records of all of the experiments that were conducted on the so-called terminal experiments and whatnot that were conducted by Nazi researchers, and a lot of that had to do with human tolerances,
Mm-hmm.
various forms of torture and pain, and just how far you could push a person in various ways before they died, as far as sleep deprivation and food deprivation and sensory overload and all of these different heinous things that they did to see how long the people could endure it before they actually died. And of course, I mean, all of that research has applications both in mind control and in interrogations, in both cases of which you want to, torture your victim as close as you can to the point of death without actually killing them, because if you kill them, then you've lost your subject, or your source of information.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I have no doubt that they do indeed have all of that information and that it's utilized in various unsavory ways, but I'm not familiar specifically with the line of research that she was discussing, or the technicalities of music containing
subliminal
rhythms or backwards masked instructions or anything like that. It's a little beyond my level of expertise.
No, and none of us really know, and actually I would say that they're ahead of the curve, only that they've heard other, individuals who spoke to that. That is not necessarily where you were going. that might be indeed where you wind up. But, yeah, I didn't want to jump you with that, but there seems to be something going on, and yet none of us really know, and nobody's really come out to say, look, what's going on here is definitely a trigger.
Yeah, well, I mean, what's this guy, Augustus, the big acid guru of the 60s up in San Francisco that had all the military and intelligence connections, had served as an intelligence officer, and his family history contained, like, all these, high-ranking officials and whatnot. Augustus Stanley, was that Owsley? Owsley.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, he was, he started out, I believe, as the Grateful Dead's sound technician. He was the one that
That's right.
Sort of shaped their sound, and he had a background in, psychological warfare and intelligence operations, and then he became the big acid producer and distributor that showed up routinely at all the big rock festivals and handed out, massive quantities of free drugs to people. And yeah, so he started out and there were other, as I recall from Martin Lee's book, Acid Dreams, I believe there were other people that were involved as sound technicians for some of these various bands that had like these intelligence connections. So, it is quite possible that they were tailoring a specific sound, or a specific pattern of sounds or specific rhythms or, whatever the case may be. But, again, I just don't have the technical knowledge to really address that in any sort of, scientific way.
No, and you need not. But it'll be interesting as you go, through your research, whether that'll come up, and not even if you want to delve in that, but if you actually, that does ding up more or less where your research leads you. I think we can admit, though, David, and we're running, about 3 minutes left to go, that certainly this didn't happen on itself, did it? I mean, I can't speak for music during the 30s and the 40s and what they were hoping to get out of that, but I'm assuming that, perhaps 60s and 70s music probably had some kind of embedded edge that music before it did not have. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, it certainly was a revolutionary new sound. I mean, it didn't sound like anything that had come along before. It was, it wasn't like a continuation of what had previously been considered, rock music, as in the, Elvis Presley, Everly Brothers kind of mold, So, yeah, I mean, it was a completely new and different sound, and it was a completely new and different look that the hippies and flower children had, and this simultaneous mass infusion of drugs, into the counterculture. Just there was a lot of things that were completely, new and different that all sort of came together all at the same time, which is, very odd. That to my mind, that all of these elements would just sort of spring up, simultaneously all at the same time. And across, pretty much across the country at a time like, as we were discussing earlier, we weren't sort of all plugged into this sort of mass consciousness.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you this. If you were to look at one group that you felt probably had the most influence in politically affecting rock and roll listeners' minds, what group would you think? Off the top of your head.
I guess it would probably be the Beatles. Although I haven't really looked into the whole British invasion angle, so I can't, I don't really know much about them, but I would say probably the Beatles, and specifically John Lennon, yes.
And that would bring us also to another very interesting situation with what happened.
Or maybe Bob Dylan, but no, probably the Beatles. But go ahead.
Okay, well, no, it's just that, we're going to pick this up because we're out of time, but, I mean, you look at what happened to Lennon. Is that also a coincidence? Listen, thanks, Dave McGowan, for being with us. Folks, you can go to his website, and you'll see the link on my site, and you can plug in to see what's going on here. Dave, thanks a lot for being with us, and we'll talk in the near future, bro.
Oh, definitely, yeah. I mean, there'll be many more parts going up, and if you see something you want to talk about, I'll be more than happy to come back.
Remember those words. We'll be back. Thank you very much, Dave.
All right, thanks.
All right, bye-bye.
All right.